Oh damn, as someone who has extensively covered the Hoyo VA strikes and the whole SAG after debacle, I gotta say, the problems that, surprise surprise, Twitter are having with the voice actors of these two characters and what they are bringing into the forefront of the community is one that really takes the cake when it comes to exposing the weirdo side of the Western Genshin community. And I don't just mean the players itself, but also the people that Hoyo's affiliated studios has hired to become the voices of these characters in the first place. Both sides seems to have their own set of unhinged individuals to deal with. Let's start with Dr. Ratio, and this is from the weirdo voice actor side because my god, his English voice actor truly got ratioed hard. So, Jordan Harrow, who voices Ratio's EN voice, was caught in quite the situation against the Hoyo community when he made a video after coming back from some sort of break where he outright stated his support and adoration for the late right-wing political activist Charlie Kirk. Now, for those of you who live under a rock, Charlie Kirk was an activist that was very vocal about his support for Israel and has said a whole lot of political and societal comments that has left quite a sour taste in many people's mouths. And to a lot of it, rightfully so. I mean, you can't really run away from it. Everyone found it ironic that he said that gun violence is a necessary sacrifice in order for US citizens to maintain their Second Amendment rights, and then, he ended up becoming a part of that statistic. And amongst all that, he was also considered a massive homophobic. So people raged at the notion that someone who voices Dr. Ratio, a character that plenty of people in the fandom like to put in a man-to-man relationship with Aventurine, was apparently a supporter of someone who well and truly would have probably been against the mere idea of their ship. Before I address that side of this topic, it is also important to remember that a lot of Jordan's affinity with Kirk was more about their aligned Christian faith than it is about their political view. I don't know if it's just me, but a lot of evangelists these days tend to just conform to anything another evangelist says so long as it is in line with their ideas to preach Christianity. And this often leads to a scenario where they would either completely miss or ignore all the other crazy shtick that the other person has said that isn't related to preaching. So when you see that Jordan said that everything that people have mentioned to him regarding Kirk was taken out of context, and that Kirk never physically harmed anyone, so, nothing truly harmful was done there, he truly believes that, 100%. And unfortunately, he simply has every right to be thinking whatever it is that he wants to be thinking, especially when it comes to the subjective matters that he was mainly focusing on. In the end, much to many people's chagrin, having opinions and different viewpoints, even dumbass ones, doesn't outright mean that you get to condemn a person into oblivion. And it's important to acknowledge that because I've seen quite some people call for him to be recast over this. Do I think that's gonna happen? Probably not. At least not with the way Hoyo has been handling recast all these times. Because if you look at the thread where he addresses this matter, it's very clear that there are a lot of people who share his viewpoint, but not only that, and look, you gotta be neutral and objective about this, Jordan and his fellow evangelist responses are far more well-spoken, eloquent, and more controlled than what his opposers are giving him. Unlike the VAs who have been recast due to the strike drama, he's not insulting anyone in the fanbase and is just going about his replies with that annoying "Jesus loves you" type of talk. They're gonna have to wait for his contract to run out for them to actually consider a recast. I'm not saying that just because Jordan and his, supporters are doing it that way makes them right, no, but arguing the way most of the Hoyo Twitter people are going with also isn't going to help rectify any points. Why is it like that? Well, I mentioned earlier that Ratio was a character that was often shipped with Aventurine, and in fact, Jordan himself has on many numerous occasions reposted his support or at least affinity for said ship, which apparently was showing other people that, oh, he supports queer relationship, so we should shower him with far more support, and that he also plays into the notion that Ratio is actually a dude enjoyer. So when his whole Charlie Kirk shtick came out, a lot of people are using their disappointment of apparently having been misled and betrayed by Jordan to then use this Ratio and Aventurine ship to, I guess make him realize the errors of his ways, which I have to say is a dumbass way to try and make an argument against someone who wasn't even relating his beliefs to the character of the game. Because he's actually right. There is no canon relationship between the playable characters of any of Hoyo's current 3 staples, and sexuality and all that crap is never touched upon in these games. Even when a man and a woman swears alliance in a bloody war and worked together for years to create a thriving civilization and had a literal sub-region named after them, and she left him with a parting gift for him to carry and never unlock his whole life, that still wasn't a canon romantic relationship. And this is bad for the Hoyo community itself because it just makes it look like you are people who are unable to differentiate fiction and reality, when you actually really have a valid point to argue for under all that stuff. One tweet says, how do you voice one of the gayest characters in a game and come out as a homophobe? And Jordan, with what I can only describe with as full logic, just says 1. Dr. Ratio isn't real. 2. Ratio sexuality has never been officially established. 3. Homophobe has lost all meaning in conversation. I don't actually know what the hell he's trying to say here, but number 4. Jesus loves you. I know for a fact that he really only gives a shit about points 2 and 4, because the latter reinforces his preaching part, while the former was his way of finding justification for himself to stand on his initial points because he found a way to paint his opposers as people who were really just reaching, when they actually have a good point. He uses this with plenty of other posts that were going about the same route, and quite frankly, if you just look at this thread on its lonesome, it wouldn't be amiss for anyone to think that he wasn't the one being unreasonable. And I guarantee you, with more of these types of messages that comes around to his thread, the more he uses it to fuel his own beliefs, which really ends up being counterintuitive to what those people who sent those messages in the first place actually want to achieve. Using headcanons and fully non-canon ships to fuel your debate regarding very real-life issues is just gonna make you look like an idiot. Another TikToker went, how are you gonna voice Boy Kisser 3000 and have this opinion? Not only does it add nothing to your debate, it also detracts from it, which is really the detrimental part. And honestly, I kind of find it more disturbing that people were more horrified about Jordan supporting a bigot rather than Jordan literally supporting a guy who, for the better part of his political career, was supporting a country that's committing the G word. I didn't see that addressed by his opposers at all in his thread. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I think priorities are slightly skewed there. I was also surprised when apparently the other big part of the problem was that he profited off of his allegedly mainly queer/female community due to his ratio popularity, since they often send him gifts of, pretty decent value through a certain site. Like, people actually do that? Voice actor seems to support the same ship as you, so you send him stuff? I'd like to think that this would be a big lesson for the people on that side of the Hoyo community. You gotta be able to separate the person from the character and the voice from the character. It'll do you absolutely no good to be obsessed with always thinking one as the same as the other. Because if you can't make that difference, then what's gonna end up happening was the Cat Protano situation, which is one that actually made me truly think, okay, Genshin Twitter is usually stupid, but this is borderline mental problem shit. So, Cat Protano is Skirk's voice actor, a very popular recent figure in Genshin's community because she's just a whole bunch of fun, interacts greatly with the community, and her dynamic with her boyfriend, Blythe Melon, who also happens to be a voice actor as well, is one of the most wholesome thing that I've seen amongst the sporadic dog-ass Twitter crap that I get shown from time to time. Coincidentally, Blythe, well, spoiler alert for Not Cry patches, do look away if you want to. 3, 2, 1, okay. Voices Rare, one of the 5 sinners of Khaenri'ah, and ended up appearing during the Not Cry Archon quest. And well, the fandom, being the fandom, began making some cool fan art revolving around Skirk being crack-shipped with Rare. Now, important keyword there, crack ship. If you don't know what crack shipping is, well, it's literally a ship made out of a joke. There's gonna be little to no canon relevance to the ship, and it was made through an entirely humor-based reason, at least usually humor-based reason, with Skirk and Rare in particular having the most obvious reason of all time. It's not the first time this whole shipping married VA roles happens. Toma and Yoimiya got a bit of taste of this since their Korean VAs are married, while Zhongli and Mavuika got this as well since their Japanese VAs are married. You'll find arguments to make those ships be canonically viable as well, but 90% of the reason would be from the simple notion that their VAs are married. However, some parts of the fandom, being some parts of the fandom, decided to say, no, that's not right, and pretty much started a set of tweets that not only accused of Kat for mischaracterizing Skirk and making them uncomfortable with the crack ship, but also a series of branching complaints that led to Kat herself to step away from Twitter, just to get away from all the shit that was turning something that we can tell she genuinely loved having fun with into something that caused her enough grievances to have to step away from the platform instead. This was one of the main threads, and it started simple, yet with all the idiocy you can think of. Had to block a VA because the ship was making me insanely uncomfortable in so many ways. The fact that they are reposting fan arts of the ship in which they are mischaracterizing the shit out of Skirk was my breaking point. I mean, what can you really do with this one? Someone just straight up replied, psychologist, while another person for some reason just straight up went, you are a homosexual pedophile, unfortunately. Which is, actually, another good example of people botching up the delivery of their arguments to the point where it pretty much invalidates their point. But apart from that, pretty much everyone else agrees that this person just needed to touch grass. And of course, with how it tends to go with these types of people who thinks they can just say things like this and be done with it, they muted the thread, feeling utmost superiority in telling others to go talk to the wall or something like that. And even during the times where they were still replying to people, when brought with a very correct point of the fact that it was just a crack ship formed out of an extremely valid reason, all they said was keywords of the tweet. Block, me, uncomfortable. That's not how any of this works, mate. You put your shit out on a public platform, obviously looking for engagement, but you don't get to just say, just gonna shut y'all up when things just didn't go your way. If you truly feel like you don't need to hear about this again, then delete the post. But no. The engagement and attention were what you really wanted. You just don't want the smoke when you really deserve it. Even a robot understood what to make out of the crack ship. A robot had more ability to read the room compared to an actual person. And truly, in my opinion anyways, if you were strictly just uncomfortable, then just block and move on. No need to then make a meal out of it by telling people, oh, y'all gotta hear about this thing that discomforted me last week. Someone tried to defend this person by saying, I still don't understand why you're getting hate. Like, you did the normal thing of blocking someone instead of making 200 hate posts. Nah dude, the normal thing to do is to block and move on, not then make a post about it. And coincidentally, they did make hate posts about what Kat was doing in her account. So whoever came to the defense just showed that they had no idea what they were talking about and also had about the same amount of brain cells as who they just tried to defend. Pempek Enjoy here, fellow Indonesian spotted, delivers my point just as well. When I block someone, I've never announced it. Maybe, just maybe, you should learn from me. It's not that serious. And as always, the whole shipping shtick plays an even bigger role when people started accusing them of just not liking straight ships. I'd know a thing or two about discussing that kind of notion, but for this one, the clues were pretty much a given. Credit to them. They tried to make it look like the only thing they had a problem with was just Skirk's characterization, but they just couldn't help themselves. Look at these replies. Wait, their entire page is just where is Skirk Lmao, that's so... I don't know what that emoji means, but whatever that means. Like, why is the art making Skirk out to be a damsel? And then, the original poster replied, because heteronormativity is fucking cursed. At least I think that's what they're trying to say. Just saw who you were referring to and oomph, I'd totally do the same. The worst part is that for once, it's a character who hasn't been implied as lesbian, so I wouldn't like the ship either, but who cares? Actually, I think that's about as straightforward as her saying like, oh yeah, because it's not straight, I'm not gonna like that, so yeah. But the mischaracterization of Skirk in those arts is so disgusting and sexist. Whom? My PFP and the disgusting male NPC from Luna 1. Like, damn bruh, if Skirk's mischaracterization was all you were miffed about, then I don't think Rere deserved any stray shots there. But we all know that's not the case here, right? I don't know man, if this is the kind of response that shipping mischaracterization deserves, then my god, I dare this person to go to the How to Train Your Dragon fandom and go ahead and yell to all the people who ships hiccup with literally anyone else other than Astrid. They are literally, canonically, married. And yet, there's still over 600 fanfiction in AO3 alone that pairs Hiccup with a guy who spent 90% of his time in the Netflix series as a villain and a dragon hunter. For context, that's almost twice the amount of Capitano/Mavuika works, more than 3 times the amount of Kayla/Firefly works, and almost 3 times the amount of Evelyn and Astra Yao works, which in my opinion, those 3 pairings have far more characterization in line for a ship than what the first 2 ever did. But that's the thing about fanfiction. It's literally fiction within fiction. It doesn't get any more fictional than that. When it all boils down, we just have to remember what the great Alex Hirsch had once said about Twitter. 90% of the problem with Twitter is treating fictional people like they're real and real people like they're fictional. It's insane how this is a much bigger problem now than what it was back then. Even to a point where a woman and her partner, who's worked their asses off to get their respective roles, can't even have fun with the fact that they are a part of the same franchise. It's ridiculous and embarrassingly immature for people to even have a problem with that. And I just don't want this to be the thing that people associate the Hoyo community with. Quite frankly, a lot of you are probably gonna say that it's too late for that, and I guess I agree, but I can only hope that there will be a better way to showcase the sides of the community which actually brings fun. I really wanted to say to Kat Protano when she made that post about stepping away from Twitter to just, yeah, it's better that way. I understand that Twitter is still one of the best ways to interact with their fans, but my god, the sucky thing about emotions is that you can have 1,000 comments that could make your day, but that one ultra negative comment will somehow always have a bigger hold over your emotions. Human nature can be a bitch at times. Though of course, it's good to see that Kat is already back on Twitter and people have showed great support for enthusiasm just the same. But it just sucks that that kind of negativity is something that is probably already so ingrained with people's impression of Hoyo Twitter that it's just expected at this point. Even as someone who is part of the Hoyo community but doesn't frequent Twitter, I know of all the shenanigans that happens there. I just wish that it was usually about better circumstances. Anyway, that's all I have for this video. Thanks for watching as per usual. Hope you guys took something away from it. Until the next video, the name's Leafy, and I'll see you all next time. Sayonara.